Well, after my 9 to 5 as an actress, I get in my Corolla and go to the studio for my 5 to 9, where I get to turn my feelings into songs. My hustles move me and inspire me. Hola hustle, hola Corolla.
I'm going to tell you a story, a real story, a terrifying one that is also a ghost story about a past that's difficult to leave behind. I'm going to tell you stories of voices that continue to be heard within the walls of a place, in the plaza, very close to midnight on cold early mornings. Voices that are heard by both residents and tourists, without finding any explanation. The sounds seem to come from the Monastery of the Sisters of the Sacrament, in Warsaw, which I had the opportunity to visit. They say the voices belong to 1,000 dead. But let me tell you where this story comes from. And for that, we need to go back to World War II, when the Nazis advanced through Warsaw fighting against the inhabitants, against the civilians who were trying to defend their city. And faced with the advance, the children, Catholics and Jews who had been orphaned, tried to take refuge in the convent, where the nuns opened their doors to them. Later, they opened their doors not only to the children, but to all the wounded who needed help. The nuns let into their convent anyone who needed refuge, but the German army realized this and sent a secret message to them. The nuns were clear. They were not the target. If they abandoned the convent, they would be pardoned and safely escorted out of the city. But not a single one of them abandoned their place. None even considered accepting that offer. They continued caring for those who needed it. When the convent was bombed, the nuns joined in prayer. All 34 sisters of the sacrament died, along with the 1,000 people they had sheltered. The convent was rebuilt, and nowadays when you pass in front of it, you can still see photos of those brave women. Their voices, along with those of all who died there, can still be heard if you pass by the place at the right moment, where you'll also notice that all the inhabitants around turn off their lights and close their windows. The strangest thing about this story is that what you hear are not voices of lament, not voices of pain or screams that remained marked there. You hear children laughing. You hear songs and prayers. It's a moment of happiness that managed to stay in that place. A moment of hope, of unity, of faith for those who want to believe it too. Where everyone there was together. Where everyone was part of the same feeling, the same love for others. Hello, Uriel. I'm Corina. I should mention up front that I'm not very good at writing in English, but I'll try. If you could narrate my story in a way that's understandable, I would greatly appreciate it. I send you a big hug and thank you very much for this project you're doing. There's not a night when I don't listen to one of your stories. I repeat them often because I love listening to them, especially the ones about witches. This story I'm telling you happened to me 8 years ago. I received a call from my Aunt Mona with very bad news. My father had been hit by a traffic officer who was on a motorcycle and dragged him approximately 20 meters in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua. He was alive in the hospital but in very serious condition. As soon as I hung up, I packed a suitcase and called my brothers to let them know. One of them immediately went with me from Ciudad Juárez to Odessa, Texas, where I live. It was the longest 4 hours of my life. When we arrived, we saw my father. He had a broken hip with metal rods holding his bones together and a leg fractured in 3 places. It was the saddest and most painful thing to see him in that state, but at least he was alive. After his surgeries, we talked with him, and although he was in a lot of pain, he was happy that we were there. He would say to me, "Don't worry, mija, the bad ones never die." And he would laugh, although in his gaze you could see a bit of fear. The doctor told us that they would operate on him again in a week and that he would be fine. After a few days, we returned home to get some things since we had left in such a hurry, and we were also going to pick up my little brother who wanted to go see my father. We had barely spent one night in Odessa when I received the worst call of my life. My father had passed away. The cause was water in his lungs that no one detected. He had trouble breathing, and being honest, I've always believed it was negligence by the hospital. The accident occurred during the Independence Day celebrations on September 16th, and when we left, the doctor who was treating him took a vacation, leaving my father in the care of nurses. But my Aunt Mona noticed something strange before he died. My father told her that my mother and my uncle, who is a pastor, had come to pray for him. My aunt found it strange that my mother hadn't mentioned she was in Juárez. She rarely crossed into Mexico, and besides, they had been separated for a long time, but I didn't want to make her uncomfortable by asking about it. When my aunt called to ask if my mother was in Juárez, I told her no, that she was with me in Texas, right in front of me at that moment. It was then that we thought that perhaps, due to the lack of oxygen, my father had hallucinated seeing her, and that made me feel worse. Knowing that he died alone, and that in his last moments he believed he saw the love of his life. I remember very well that after that call, I was in shock, and then cried inconsolably, hugging my mother. I had just left my father doing well in the hospital. With all the pain in the world, I called my brothers to tell them what had happened. My older brother Michael took us to Juárez because I couldn't drive. My eyes were permanently filled with tears. I could barely see the road. When we arrived, we held awake for him for 2 days. It was the saddest moment of my life to see my father in a coffin, lifeless, and to touch his cold hands. I tried to appear strong, but inside, the pain was unbearable. A week later, the funeral home transferred his body to an ambulance and asked me to identify him. I went alone, saw him, cried, and said goodbye as best I could. I kissed his hands, his cheeks, hugged him knowing it was the last time I would see him, and then returned to Odessa. A week and a half later, they notified me that his ashes were ready. From then on, I fell into a deep depression. I cried and drank daily. I clung to his ashes and his clothes. I did this for 9 months. Sometimes I would wake up screaming and crying, calling for him, and I remember very well how my mother would come in to see me, to console me, and all I could repeat was, "Why, Mom? Why my daddy?" My mother tried to comfort me, but she saw me in such a bad state that she feared I would go crazy. I stopped working. My life was reduced to drinking and crying. I begged God to let me see him one more time, to hug him one last time. I even bought a Ouija board trying to communicate with him, but of course, I never succeeded. I know it sounds crazy, but I was so desperate that I did that. And the worst part was that on many occasions, other spirits responded, but I knew they weren't him. I always knew how to test them. They could answer many things, but I knew they weren't him. One day I came home from the liquor store, and my mom scolded me for continuing to drink. She was increasingly sad to see me like this, but as always, I ignored her. I went to my room, and when I opened the door, I saw him. My father was sitting on my bed with his back to me, looking toward the window. I was completely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move forward. I wanted to think it was my drunkenness, my sadness, my mind. I wanted to go in and hug him, but I knew that wasn't him. Deep down, I knew it. I had lost him months ago. When my mother saw me standing there, frozen, she approached to see what was wrong, and I still remember her expression of terror, how all the air escaped from her mouth when she stood beside me, and she too could see him. She slowly closed the door, very slowly and full of tears. I don't know if they were from fear, sadness, or both. She hugged me, saying, "That's not your father, mija. That's not something good. Let him rest in peace. He can't leave because you won't let him. Your father wouldn't have wanted to see you like this. What would he say? What would he say if he saw you like this?" That thing disappeared from my room. And above all, those words made me react. I stopped drinking and went back to work. With my mother, we made an altar for my father. We put his ashes, photos, a little candle, and prayed for him to find peace. Sometimes the pain is so great that we don't let those who have left us rest. I would really like to know, community, what you think of the previous story. I think it's a very interesting topic, and no one would know how to react to the appearance of someone you love. On one hand, there's an enormous desire for it to really be that person you love, saying goodbye, being there close to you. But on the other hand, what better way for an evil entity to manifest itself then through an image that will provoke a lot of feelings of energy, which is what they feed on. I would really like to know your opinion, what you would do or what you have done if you've already had a similar experience. And now we continue with more stories. Good evening, my name is Barbara, and I want to tell you about one of the most intense paranormal experiences I've had. I'm from Venezuela, from Zulia state, and there, belief in witchcraft and santeria is very, very common. The belief is so strong that many families like mine have their own trusted witch. In our case, it's a family friend, Joa. She takes care of reading cards, doing work, and protecting us from any harm. Although we are believers in God, we are also sure that we are not alone in this world. We believe in saints, in demons, and in forces that we don't fully understand, but we know they are there. This story begins on my 11th birthday. The party was big, full of family and friends. Among the guests, of course, was Joa, whom I always viewed with respect, even with a little fear. I remember there was a group of women talking by the pool, and I was very close by. Everything seemed normal until one of my stepfather's friends, who had already drunk too much, approached the group of women and began to dance in a rough and heavy manner. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he pushed one of the women into the water, forgetting that she was 8 months pregnant. The scene was shocking. Everyone was angry with him, but the one who reacted the most was Joa, who stared at him fixedly with a disturbing calmness. After the atmosphere calmed down a bit, Joa poured herself a glass of whiskey and, keeping her eyes on the man who had pushed the woman, spoke to him in a tone of voice so cold that it made me shudder. The fact that you behave like an idiot doesn't remove the inevitable. As a show of my faith, I'm going to warn you. Your mother's defenses will drop in a week. She will die peacefully. You can't do anything about it because her illness will push her to the limit. Your actions today, on the other hand, will attract all evils to your life. And from this moment, until I reach my house, you will act like a cat, like a dog, like a pig, for the lack of respect towards this woman and her baby. As soon as she finished speaking, I swear the man fell to the ground unconscious, but the most terrifying thing happened when he got up. His eyes seemed lost, and he began to behave in a way that didn't seem human. He crawled, growled, cried, and rolled in the dirt as if he were an animal. He moved away from people, and when my stepfather tried to approach to calm him down, the man bit his hand as if he were truly a wild dog. Then he continued to behave erratically, even getting to the point of urinating on himself, soiling himself. It was a grotesque scene like something out of a nightmare. While all this was happening, Joa seemed calm, although she gave a warning to my cousin, telling her to be careful because at age 20, she would end up having a child with a man who would never be responsible. She also told me something that still haunts me. Joa told me that I would have 2 children, but that one of them would be born lifeless. Amid the chaos, no one knew what to do until my stepfather decided to take Joa to her house to see if that would calm things down. The man's crisis only stopped when my stepfather returned from dropping off Joa, when he said she was already at her house. Apparently, as soon as she entered her home, the man fell to the ground suddenly again, as if something dark had abandoned him. The next day, no one could explain what had happened, but what was even more chilling is that everything Joa predicted that night has come true. The man's mother died exactly 7 days later. My cousin, at age 20, had a child with a man who abandoned her, and I still have that last prophecy circling in my mind, not knowing if someday it will also come true. Since then, I have many stories with this woman who made me firmly believe that there are things beyond what we can understand. Thank you for giving me the space to share this story.
Well, after my 9 to 5 as an actress, I get in my Corolla and go to the studio for my 5 to 9, where I get to turn my feelings into songs. My hustles move me and inspire me. Hola hustle, hola Corolla.
Hello Uriel, my name is Daniel, and I'm from Nuevo León State. I'm a faithful follower of this program. I really don't miss any episode, especially because I listen to them at work. I'm usually quite busy and have to move around a lot, so it's easier for me to put on headphones and listen while I do my activities. Also, with the long shifts, sometimes I need something to keep me entertained so that time passes more quickly. But getting to the point, I want to tell you something that just happened to me, specifically on Friday, October 18th. You should know that I've always been very interested and fascinated by the paranormal, or the strange in this world, but nothing this strong had ever happened to me before. Until that moment, paranormal stories only came from the tales my grandmother told me as a child, about witches and things like that. As a child, several strange things happened to me, like when at 9 years old, I dressed up as a devil to ask for candy. I remember that when we returned home, we wanted to take a photo to remember the moment, but when we checked it, behind me there was a figure, a giant shadow with horns. And of course, it wasn't the mask I was wearing, since I was just over a meter tall, and what was standing behind me was surely over 2 meters tall. However, as I'm telling you, nothing really strong had ever happened to me until this Friday. You see, I work 4 consecutive days of 12 hours, and then I have several days to rest, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. That Friday, I got off work at night and arrived home in the morning. I already had plans to go with some friends to some cabins, and out of respect for the owner of the place, I'm not going to tell you the name and address because I don't want to affect his business. That day we left my house at 10 in the morning, as we had reserved the entry for 12 noon, and we wanted to arrive on time, and so we did. We arrived right on time. To not make the story too long, I'll say that we arrived, bought beer, and began to enjoy our stay in the cabins during the following hours. When night fell, as I was very sleep-deprived, I decided to separate from my friends who were by the bonfire and went to the rooms. It's worth mentioning that the bonfire was near the pool, so the rooms weren't that close, possibly 10 or 15 meters away. The cabin had 2 floors. Downstairs was the open dining room, the living room, and the kitchen. There was also a bathroom behind a shelf with decorations, and a cabinet where they kept things like towels and toilet paper. On the upper level, there were 3 bedrooms. As I was telling you, I was very tired after my shift without sleep, so I ate something quick and went to sleep in the largest room. Inside it, there was a wardrobe that went from floor to ceiling, perfect for storing our things, like coats and the clothes we would use those days. The detail is that the wardrobe was really quite large, with a depth of about 60 centimeters. I decided to take advantage of it to store my things. There was plenty of space. I started listening to music on my cell phone while chatting in a group chat with other friends. At one point, I got up to go to the bathroom so I wouldn't have to get up later, and little by little, I fell asleep. But I woke up around 4 in the morning. I got up a bit disoriented because on my cell phone an old episode of Relatos de la Noche was playing, but that wasn't the strange part. On several occasions when I'm on my way to work and listen to other podcasts, when they end, the algorithm automatically plays Relatos de la Noche because I listen to it a lot. That's normal. What was truly strange was that when I regained consciousness, I noticed that the door to the room was ajar. The hallway light was off. I clearly remembered that I had left the light on and the door closed, since only I was in that room. I thought that perhaps my friends had peeked in to see if I was asleep or something, so I got up. I turned on the hallway light again and closed the door once more. I decided to look out the window and saw my friends outside, all laughing and playing, still very awake. They were telling stories and anecdotes they had experienced together. I felt like joining them again, so I put on my shoes and was about to go down the stairs. However, as I was going down, the cold in the environment became more intense. That made me think that outside it would be even colder. I went back for a sweater and for my phone. When I returned to the room, I was greeted by a very strong smell of earth and something similar to rotten eggs. I assumed it came from the bathroom, since the room was right above it. I didn't pay much attention to it because I was planning to leave immediately and would resolve it later. I entered and partially closed the door and began to look for the sweater in the closet. Suddenly, I heard the door opening slowly. I looked out but saw nothing, so I assumed that perhaps it was the wind, since the main door was open because my friends were coming in and going out for beer and to go to the bathroom. I wasn't alarmed and continued searching. Suddenly, my phone rang very loudly, which scared me and made it fall to the floor. It was one of my friends calling me. I put it on silent, but before answering, I heard again how the door was opening slowly. This time, there was someone there. I saw a horrible white face with horns peeking in. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness of the hallway, I saw that it was a creature more than 2 meters tall, dressed in something red like a tunic or a coat. Fear invaded me, and I didn't know what to do, so I tried to get into the closet. As I was getting in, I stepped on part of my clothes, and that thing, that demon or whatever it was, opened the upper part of the door with a very long hand. I was dying of fear, so I hid deeper in the closet, closing it completely, covering myself with 2 sweaters, covering myself with everything I found. The phone rang again. I quickly turned it off, and then I heard a heavy sound, as if giant paws, as if a bull or an animal. That heavy began to walk toward where I was, toward the closet. The smell of dead dog or rotten eggs became even stronger, a stench so nauseating that it was almost impossible to bear without vomiting. While trying to hide more and more, I began to hear steps coming up the stairs, as if someone or something was approaching, and at that moment I tried to think what to do. Try to run out, push that thing, seek refuge with my friends, or shout to them, or stay hidden there. Fear paralyzed me while I tried to decide. Terror had already taken hold of me. The door began to open slowly, and I heard heavy breathing, as if it were an animal snorting. Although I know all this sounds completely crazy, I swear to you that what I was hearing was as if something gigantic was completely around me. Then I heard that thing backing away. I knew it by the heavy steps moving away. While trying to calm down, I heard something coming up the stairs. Suddenly, the door opened with a bang. The room light turned on and one of my friends shouted my name. I came out of the wardrobe still trembling. They were a little scared, but quickly thought I was playing a prank on them, that I wanted to scare them. Without saying anything, I hurried out of the room and went down to the bathroom. Everyone was wondering what was happening to me, what was going on, but I only had to tell them that I had had a nightmare. During the night, we didn't talk more about the subject, and of course, I remained very restless. It wasn't until the next day, when by chance we started talking about scary things, that I finally found the courage to tell them what had happened. At first, they remained silent, until one of them confessed something. He had gone to the bathroom before coming to get me. He said that while he was outside, he heard heavy footsteps on the floor above. He wanted to think it was me moving around, but also someone else saw something strange in my room from the bonfire. He said that for a few seconds, he thought he saw a small fire ignite that disappeared instantly. After that, he says he saw me peek out the window, turn the light on and off without making any movement. After that vision, he thought I would come down to join them. However, something else appeared, a larger figure, wrapped in a red blanket, something that moved within the room. He believed that I was simply arranging my blankets, but the movement in the silhouette didn't seem normal. It was then that he decided to tell another friend to go look for me. We all felt a deep fear. We decided at that moment to gather our things and all sleep together in the living room. In the morning, after a very quick breakfast, we all got into the vans and left the place behind. Although they have tried to convince me that it was a dream, that it was all a fantasy, there's no way my friends could have seen something so similar to what I saw. Yes, we know there's something in that cabin, but no one wants to find out what. We prefer not to return and never discuss the topic again.
Well, after my 9 to 5 as an actress, I get in my Corolla and go to the studio for my 5 to 9, where I get to turn my feelings into songs. My hustles move me and inspire me. Hola hustle, hola Corolla.